Hey there, welcome or welcome back. My name is Emily and I make art videos. Today is very exciting because I am taking you along while I make my dream watercolor palette, the ultimate watercolor palette, if you will. We're also going to make possibly the biggest color mixing chart ever, and we're going to do some watercolor paintings. This may be a bit of a longer video, so I hope you can join me, relax, or maybe work on your own art project. So as of late, I have been spending a lot of time learning how to use watercolors. It's always been a medium I've come back to now and then, but I definitely haven't mastered it, or at least gotten to the point where I'm fully comfortable and confident using it. I haven't put in the hours that I have with gouache or with oils, so I think for the next little bit, I want to focus on improving my watercolor skills. I actually started this video ages ago. It's taken me so long to make this for a few reasons, some that we will get into later, but the first reason being that I spent a long time researching and deciding which colors I wanted in this palette. You might think that as someone who is trying to figure out watercolor, that it would have been better to start with a small palette of colors. And a lot of the times that is how I have worked with watercolor in the past, but because I didn't have experience trying a lot of different colors, different pigments, I always sort of just blindly chose a basic palette of colors. I really wanted this palette to be a way for me to try a larger selection of colors and to get used to how they perform, how different colors mix together, and hopefully I will discover what my favorite paints are, and then I'll be able to make myself a smaller palette for on the go that is truly tailored for me and not just, a basic set of colors that I think could work. I wanted this palette to be for watercolor exploration in the studio, so I will list all of the colors I chose for this palette in the description so you can check that out. I also spent a long time looking for the perfect palette itself, and I think I found it. This is a huge palette with 35 paint wells. I wanted a large palette with lots of mixing space for painting in the studio. I also wanted one that opened completely flat. I don't really like it when they open and one side hovers off of the desk, if you know what I mean. I was also hoping to get a metal palette, which is a preference of mine. My last palette that I had for years was a plastic palette, and I've just found that I prefer mixing colors on the metal surface, or I guess the enamel on the metal. The paint just pools better, and it's also a little less prone to staining, I found. I will have this palette linked down below. This is not a sponsored video, by the way. I made a little swatch card for the palette so that I know where they all are in the palette and what brands they are. And then I decided that I would make a color mixing chart for this palette that would include all of the possible two color mixes. And I don't think I could picture how big this would end up being, but it ends up being pretty huge. It took me weeks to make this chart, but it was honestly so much fun. It might be the first mixing chart I've ever created, so I guess go big or go home. If you're curious how I formatted this chart, I basically took the idea of the standard mixing chart where you put all of the colors on the X and Y axis, and then wherever those two colors meet on the chart is where you place the color mix. But the problem with that format is that you end up getting 3 swatches for each paint color in your palette, and you also get 2 swatches for each of the color mixes. So in my opinion, it doesn't end up being the easiest to read, especially at this scale when there's 35 colors and there ends up being over 1,000 color mixes. So instead, I placed all of my colors on the diagonal axis where the paint colors would meet if they were on the X and Y. And I created a triangle chart instead of the full square. I hope that makes sense. So this way we have 1 swatch for each color in the palette and 1 swatch for each color mix. This chart is a lot easier to read as there aren't a bunch of repeat colors. In the future, I can decide to do the top half of this chart, and I could do something like mix the colors with more water to see how the mixes would look more diluted, or I could do layered mixes, but this honestly took me so long that I don't know if I'll ever actually sit down to do that. But the chart is really beautiful to look at, and I think it would look amazing framed on the wall, so maybe I will do it someday. I think that color charts and color wheels are the most aesthetically pleasing things to look at. I just love them. So one of the reasons this video took so long is that I felt like I needed some time off camera to practice with watercolor, so that's what I did. I've been doing a ton of little watercolor sketches, a lot of them not turning out very good, but I've just been putting in the hours. I think with art, the best way you can improve is by doing and doing over and over again. This repetition creates those neurological pathways in your brain that we want to build. So that will always be my number one advice to anyone that wants to improve their art, is just to keep doing it. The more you do it, the better you'll get. And also, failures are necessary. There is no possible way to practice art and not create bad art, not create, failed pieces, ugly pieces. You have to do that to be able to learn. So you really can't get down on yourself when you're just practicing art and being an artist. And that's just how it goes. Every failure just means that you are learning and putting in the time, so that's worth a pat on the back in my mind. Besides practicing watercolor, I have also been watching lots of videos and looking at a lot of watercolor art that inspire me. I've been watching a lot of Hamrib's watercolor videos. I even asked her what watercolor brushes she recommended, and she actually kindly sent me her watercolor brush set that she created with Craftamo. She had an extra set lying around and kindly offered to send it to me, so I will be trying those a little later in the video. She also recommended the silver black velvet brushes, which I did buy and have been using and really enjoying. Some other watercolor artists that really inspire me are Runge, Benjamin Björklund, also Sebastian Tinajero. I have a print of one of his watercolor pieces on my wall, so I've been looking at a lot of those artists' work to get inspired. Oh, also Casanova, he's incredible. I joined his Patreon so I could see some of his watercolor processes, and it was really cool to see how he approaches his watercolor paintings. Anyways, so I have this idea in my head of how I want my watercolor pieces to look, and I'm not there yet, but every time I sit down with my palette and paint, I know that I am learning a little bit more and getting a little bit more comfortable with watercolor. It almost feels like watercolor can sense fear. So oftentimes when I'm sitting down to paint, I feel like I'm overthinking and I'm nervous I'm gonna mess up, and I feel like that's really holding me back. You want to be confident with watercolor, but you don't want to be cocky. I don't know, watercolor is a tricky medium, but I love it. And I'm excited to bring it into my practice more, along with my gouache painting and my oil painting. So here you can see a little eye study that I did off camera, one of the many little sketches I've done. I liked how this one turned out, though it's not quite the look I'm going for. I want my watercolor pieces to feel a little bit more expressive and have a little bit more of a layered design quality, if that makes sense. I don't really want to, recreate photographs with watercolor. So with this first little painting on camera, I did another eye study, and I tried to keep those things in mind. I considered this one to be a little bit of a fail. It started out promising, but I think I just got a little bit floppy towards the end. So we're gonna do a couple more eye studies, this time in this beautiful Etcher sketchbook. This video took me so long to make that partway through this video, Etcher Lab reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to try a couple of their sketchbooks and their gouache brushes. And I was like, absolutely I do. I've heard such good things about their sketchbooks. A lot of artists I follow use their basic watercolor sketchbooks, the white one. They also sent me their perfect sketchbook, which is absolutely gorgeous. This one's hot press. They're both 100% cotton, but the perfect sketchbook is 300 GSM and the other one is 230 GSM. So still really good, but not quite at that 300 level. So you'll see me try out the basic white sketchbook in this video. It's cold press, and I promise I will try the perfect sketchbook and the gouache brushes in a future video. I've come to realize that I prefer cold pressed cotton paper for watercolor and hot pressed paper for gouache. I find that with gouache it doesn't matter as much what the composition of the paper is. Cotton is really nice, but I also use cellulose paper for gouache and acrylic gouache, and I really enjoy the process with those. So for this study, I wanted to try a fun color palette, and I also wanted to really think about the layers I'm using to construct the image. I'm using Princeton Neptune brushes for this one. I've been really liking those. I hadn't received hand ribs brushes yet at this point, but I do use them in the next study. I like how this one turned out. It's still apparent that I need to learn water control, but I felt like this was a step in the right direction. I finished it off with a little colored pencil to bring back a few edges that I had lost. I don't know why, but this kind of felt like cheating a little bit. Ooh, and if you're wondering what that lavender colored tape is, it's something I discovered recently. It's Scotch Delicate Surface Tape, and it's absolutely perfect for taping off watercolor paintings or gouache paintings, and it doesn't tear the paper like at all. I've never had tape like this. Usually I have to use a blow dryer to get my tape up without ripping the paper, but not with this guy, so I really recommend it. And the pretty color is a bonus. I added it to my Amazon recommendation list. I'll have that link down below. I also updated that recently with a ton of the supplies that I use and recommend, so you can check that out if you're interested. This last study I actually did a few weeks later. I was able to try Ham Ribs brush set. I really liked them. They're very soft, so you can be both expressive and precise. But despite the lovely brushes, I really struggled with this one. I used mostly a primary palette of Cad Red, Yellow Ochre, and Cerulean Blue. I really struggled with water control, and I think my head was someplace else, as the past few weeks were very stressful as my dog had gotten sick and needed surgery. There were a lot of late nights with her and a lot of emotions, but she's doing amazing now. Looking back though, I can tell I was super distracted during this painting, but as I said earlier in the video, this was a fantastic learning experience, so I don't consider it a waste of time in the slightest. I'm really excited to use Ham Ribs brushes more in the future. They are absolutely gorgeous and so lovely to work with. I would love to try them with gouache. I've seen her use them with gouache and they look incredible for that as well. Thank you so much, Ham, for sending these once again. I'm sorry my painting was kind of a fail. Also, to let you guys know my thoughts on this Etcher sketchbook, I really loved it. I haven't used many watercolor sketchbooks, but this is definitely my favorite. I've been using it quite a lot off camera and just really loving it. As I'm trying to get better with watercolors, it's really nice to use supplies that aren't fighting against me but helping me, and this sketchbook definitely feels like that. I haven't tried the perfect sketchbook yet. I will definitely let you know when I do. It will most likely be on camera. And I think I've gotten a lot more comfortable with watercolors since filming this, so I'm excited to show you more in the future. I want to say thank you for making my year 2023 so amazing. It's really crazy how much this channel has grown over the year. I'm so excited about all of the videos I have planned for the new year, so please subscribe if you haven't already and join me for another fun year of art making. A huge thank you as well to my channel members. You guys are so wonderful. I really appreciate the extra support. So I think this is it for this one. I will see you all very, very soon with another video. Bye-bye.